even though we're still chatting. There we go. All right. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. It's nice to see a big crowd because I know it's really busy starting out the year, but we really have a bunch of things to get in sync with, and I think this is a good opportunity. But Happy New Year to anyone that's just coming on, and it's great to see everybody. So Kathleen's going to keep letting people in, and I'm going to share my slides right away so I don't get off track like I usually do. And we already have a couple chats there, but I think they're Kathleen. All right, let's go. So normally, you know, this is my state and federal updates that we do monthly. Today, we're only going to be talking about state updates, although there's a lot going on federally too. And in case you don't know me, I am the Director of Government Affairs and Health Policy for the ARC, and I also run Operation House Call. And just for full knowledge, I also sit on the Executive Committee for Advocates for Autism in Massachusetts. So if any issues come up specific to autism, I'm a good person to bring them to as well. So let's get going on what we're going to accomplish in a half an hour. So I'm just going to give you a little wrap up if you haven't already heard of the 192nd session. Some of you kind of lived through it at the State House with me, but we have, you know, not the greatest news, but some good news that came in at the end of the session. We will talk about the transition to the new administration and some important events. And then we're going to focus on these key issues that are facing our constituents so that everyone kind of understands the background and the messaging, because that's really important as we advocate that we have a solid understanding. And then we'll talk about the workforce legislative priorities, which of course are our top priorities. But not to say that we won't be focusing on the FY24 budget, which will be coming out soon. And then all of our other legislative priorities, which are looking like maybe about 15 bills this year. And then, you know, if we have time, of course, you can ask questions all along as well. So let's jump right in. I just have to always include a picture of one of my children. So there we go. And this was the end of the informal session. In case people didn't know, there's still activity happening at the State House until the end of the informal, which was actually on Tuesday this year. And we had a couple of bills that we were really pushing. Supported decision making was one, and the records bill that supported the special commission on the history of state institutions. The unfortunate news is that neither one of those passed through the informal. Informal is very difficult. It takes a unanimous decision, as you probably all know, and it's very challenging to get priority. They mostly do local bills, and they're pushing through as many local bills as possible. But we felt because the supported decision making passed through the Senate early in the informal session, that it was worth putting a huge effort into getting it through the House. So you might have seen our action alerts going out and our call-in day, and some of you participated in all of that, plus more, contacting your rep yourself or going into the State House to advocate. So the one thing that I think that push did for us is it really sets up supported decision making for the next session. The House Ways and Means Office is not going to forget that 250 people called them at the end of the session. They're not going to forget the advocacy that went on. And it also gave us an opportunity to see the champions in the legislature that really stood up for the bill and really want to see it come to fruition. So I think we're set up pretty well for those bills going into the next session. And speaking of the next session, everyone was inaugurated yesterday, all the legislators, and we actually have around 25 new legislators to work with. And I mentioned this because it's important. You may have a new legislator. I mentioned this last time that there was also a lot of redistricting done. And so you may just want to check to make sure you know who your legislator is this year, who your rep and senator are. And if they happen to be new, definitely take the time to, or even if you haven't met with your rep or senator in a while, take the time to introduce yourself, you know, write an email, do an intro, meet with staff, set up a Zoom, go to the district hours, send a photo, tell them about the people you work with, you know, really share your story right now, because you're going to need them as the session comes along. And it's good to make that contact so they know who you are and what's important to you. We also saw yesterday, I believe, or this morning maybe, that Governor Haley has appointed Mary Beckman as the new Secretary of Health and Human Services, which is a pretty big job, as you know. I think they controls $27 billion of the budget. And we've been very, very used to having Mary Lou Sutters as our secretary. So this is a transition that we really need to focus on. We got to really get engagement and connection to her and all the other newly appointed leaders. We also have a very quick bill filing date coming up of January 20th. And that basically means we have to have the language really tightened up for all of our bills, and we need to have our rep and our Senate sponsor tightened up for those bills as well. And then you're kind of off to the races, and it's where we're chasing co-sponsors and trying to build coalition support for these bills and getting ready for hearings. So the fun really begins. But of course, the budget jumps in there and really takes up our time and effort. This year, the budget has actually a potentially shorter time frame for us in terms of advocacy, as the new governor has until March 1st, I think, to release the budget. Now, normally we see it the third week of January, which gives us time to pull together an ask based on that governor's budget, and to really come up with the very specific funding needs that we see. So we'll be racing whenever she does release the budget to get together our ask and response of that. I hope all of that makes sense. And I did want to give you, and this is part of sort of the background and a little bit about the messaging that we're going to be incorporating this year. And as you all know, the day programs still are not back to capacity. We're still suffering from the workforce and COVID crisis. And, you know, COVID itself maybe is not causing day programs to shut down, but it's the combination of what COVID, did during its worst times, and the fact that the workforce crisis has not improved enough to really get staff back in there and bring people back. But those folks that we're most concerned about, as you know, are those with the most complex needs. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But DDS is reporting that at their day programs, they have at least 78%. Mass Health is at a census close to 7,200, which we can see is much down from the 10K that was pre-pandemic. And in our partner ADDP, the trade organization, has reported that 20 day hubs have actually closed. So with all of that information, we know that we are not underestimating the fact that many individuals are home and not getting served by day programs. And these are folks who are at home or potentially in their residences and not being really not having a day program to attend. And these are the folks that we're most concerned about right now. So we continuously add turning 22 people to the mix. And oops, I think I actually pulled out the number on this slide, but we do have over 2,300 people since COVID shut down until February 22, that turned 22 and needed adult services. So in that 2-year time frame, we're looking at around 2,300 people. They are struggling still to find the appropriate programming. And we also have the most challenged people home. And those are folks I was just talking about who are either unserved or underserved, meaning they might have 1 day or 2 days, or they have a couple days, but no transportation, which makes it really impossible. And in the end, what we're seeing is many of these folks ending up in crisis. Families are super stressed. And if you saw the article in Commonwealth magazine yesterday or the day before, it talks about, you know, how this crisis is really affecting our hospitals, where so many folks are ending up boarding in the hospital and then with no place to go from there. So it's not a good message. It's a very critical message though. And we need to be able to really get this across to our legislature and administration. The other thing we think is really important as a message is that, you know, bias has affected our disability community forever. And, you know, one of the reasons why we were so pleased to see the special commission bill get passed this year was because it started to look at, yes, it's important to know how bias affected and still affects people with disabilities. But we see sort of a double whammy for our workforce, as they are so critical to taking care of people and being caregivers for people with disabilities. But because they're made up mostly of female and minorities, we see that inequity even multiplied more. So that's what we're fighting, to get prioritization and to get funding. We want to get the attention of the legislature and say our workforce is critical. And then we want to say our workforce is so important that you need to increase their rate of pay. And these are just, you know, some of the barriers we're truly facing. The other barriers we face is that Massachusetts is the 3rd highest state for cost of living, maybe even higher now. We have a lot of trouble with geography in terms of transportation. There are certain areas that make it very difficult for anyone who doesn't own a car to get to a day program or a residence. So all of that becomes geographically challenging. The change in minimum wage versus the change in the DSP benchmark, it's not keeping in line. We have an actual slide to show the legislature next week of how, you know, little we've increased our DSP rates over the years. And, you know, hopefully that will make an impact. Right now, we did see, I meant to say this on the slide about the informal session, we did see some money come in for direct support workforce rates. And we're hoping that money will at least bump the rate up maybe by $1.50, but we have a lot further to go, right? We want to get them up and over $20 an hour. And right now it's probably closer to high 17, 18. Okay, so the solutions. Chapter 257, you all heard, you all know that we want to reach the 75th percentile of Massachusetts BLS. And that is the Bureau of Labor Statistics. In order to reach that for this occupation grouping, it will cost us over $580 million just to get up to $20 an hour for a DSP. So again, it's a big ask. It was a big ask last session, but we're back to that same need because that's what's going to bring it up. We also need to address mass health rates to achieve those similar benchmarks. Although they do not fall under Chapter 257, we still need to advocate so that they all come up at the same time. with equity in all of those areas: Dayhab, PCA, nursing, adult foster care. And we truly need to look at a system redesign. So increasing availability and transparency of self-directed services is a main issue for us. I know many of you were involved in the hearing that came up right before the holidays to comment on the regulations that were released for self-directed services. And you know, we hopefully as a community, we made an impact, but right now this is our time to continue to advocate for more transparency. And I think we have more information to share on that as well. But we will be filing a bill. It's an ARC bill that we are in collaboration with ADDP on, and it will require the 75th percentile of the Bureau of Labor Statistics for Chapter 257, specifically for DDS and Mass Health. So it doesn't say DDS there for some reason, but it is. So that is an exciting development, because we will have, you know, our own legislation to focus on that's more narrow, that's specific to our community of people with IDD and autism. Feeling I might go over today, so I'm going to keep going kind of quick. So in terms of that, you know, system redesign that we were talking about, we really do need to prioritize workforce in our programs and those who are getting in-home services. This is the message we want to give to the administration, and the messaging behind our big asks, you know, our big money asks. Family caregivers should not be experiencing bias and should be allowed payments and stipends. And this is a really important issue. We know during the pandemic that families could not find caregivers, and they were doing all of the work. Some of them enjoy this, want to do this, and should be allowed to be paid to do it. And if they want to do it temporarily, that should be okay too. So we're looking to really move that message forward. We need to nurture and expand the other cost-effective options. And we know these are all of those options, but we have to make them really accessible and transparent to families. Again, here's some more on the self-direction programs, transparent funding allocation processes, guidelines that allow full budget and employer authority, and personal agents should be available to help with planning. And that's just some of the advocacy needed around the self-direction programs. Other priorities, of course, we are really needing to look at housing, employment, transportation, technology. We need to look at equitable access to services. So in terms of PCA, people who need prompting and queuing need access to that as a service. So we need to really begin to push on that PCA bill. We want to be able to have responsible parties paid as PCAs if that's what they want. And ABA for adults. Obviously, this was a priority last year. We need to continue to push. If you have private insurance, you can get ABA as an adult. If you have Mass Health, you can't. Also looking at societal access, you know, to healthcare training. We need to do a better job on healthcare training, police training, really focus on education, early education, and do more education and outreach to our state agencies. And then our other areas that, you know, have been priority for a long time are the abuser registry. We want to make sure that that continues to have successful implementation. And in doing that, we need some support on their regulation changes for their bill that has to do with the language that will support Nikki's law, Dana's law. And we want to expand. We want to continue to expand the abuser registry, but this year specifically for mass health rehab, DAHABs, sorry. We still have banning aversive therapies, and of course, formalizing the supported decision-making. So I know that's a lot. They are actually listed here. Of course, we don't have bill numbers yet. As I said, we're still in that process of securing our sponsors, making language changes based on last session, or some of these bills might be new. For example, the community college tuition reimbursement for direct support professionals. That is a new bill being led by Senator Barrett. Although I read yesterday that Senate President Spilka has it on her platform that she wants to make community college free, which would be wonderful. And if she puts out a bill on that, or if there's some way that we can support that, obviously we will. And that would be wonderful for our direct support professionals to be able to get free community college. So the only other new bills on there are really our own workforce rate increase bill that's specific to our community. And the rest should all be fairly familiar to you all. And again, this is not in any priority, but these are the bills that we know for sure we want to file. All right. So, and not to forget that we have a lot of work to do on the state budget, right? So this is last year's final budget. And when the new governor releases her budget, it will come out as, I believe, a House 1 budget this year. And we will go line by line, looking at each of these important line items and looking at the number of constituents and the utilization, and we will be able to come up with what we think needs to be in that line item, and then begin to advocate for that with the House and the Senate and the conference committee. So I know that was a lot of information between budget, bills, new administration, and the end of the year. But don't forget that we also have some events coming up, and this year in person, and it'll be amazing to be back in the State House for our legislative reception on March 7th. We want to, obviously do it safely, but we want to get as many people as possible in there to show support. We don't have a lot of details on that event yet, but hopefully, by next week, we will be able to share our who our awardees will be, and of course our priorities are very similar to what I've been talking to you about, but hopefully a little more honed down. And after, I mentioned this in the beginning, but after we file our bills, we will be putting out a request for everyone to help have their rep and senator sign on, take a look at the bills, become a co-sponsor. And then something to look forward to would be the bill sharing day. And I know MDDC is usually holding that, hopefully sometime in February. Someone can tell me if we have a date yet. And yeah, we also have AFAM Day coming up in April with a to be determined on that date. So a lot going on. I'm going to stop my share. And I know I talked really quickly. Angela, any date that you know of yet for the bill sharing? Yeah, probably sometime in February, right?
Yes, I would assume, especially with it being so soon, the bill filing. I think we were waiting, it was going to be late, thinking it was going to be a little later, but.
It's one of my favorite days because you really get to hear the most passionate people talking about their bills and the details that you don't get on a fact sheet,
So true.
So nice. So questions from people on any of that information? Well, we will make it easier. As the bills get filed, you will be able to have access to fact sheets. We will have action alerts. And of course, with the budget, we will have a very, very clear ask on exactly how much we're going to need in the workforce and specific to those line items as well.
Mara, is there anything, I know you're focusing just on state, but federally from a funding standpoint, is there anything that will be coming in to help offset some of the state asks in the budget, or how do you look at that?
Right. I think that I don't know what still might be coming in terms of ARPA. I'm afraid some of that is winding down. But as you know, the state is very full. Our revenues were up again in December, much further higher than we expected. And we are still kind of grappling with the ARPA funds one thing I also didn't mention about the informal session was DDS did announce some excellent incentives for providers to add additional residential placements. So on top of the money they would normally get for each individual, they're offering an additional $100,000 one-time money, and hoping that that incentivizes providers, you know, because we do have so many people waiting. And there's also a fantastic, I think it's going to be fantastic respite program. Not a ton of details out on it yet. But it is geared to serve those families who have been struggling, and it's geared to serve the more complex folks who aren't able to necessarily access typical respite. So hopefully we'll hear more. I don't know if anyone on the call has any more information about the DDS respite funds and program, but hopefully we'll get some more info about that. And so in terms of funding, I think the state really needs to figure out what they're going to be doing, and this is a good time for us to be advocating for those, you know, given the additional revenue. Hopefully that translates to our budget coming out in a way that we don't need to advocate much for the budget. I know that we will need to advocate for the workforce line item with that large request. So, but we will be touching on, you know, ways that we can advocate federally as well during the next, you know, during the next quarter. All right, guys. Well, I really appreciate everybody being here today. And like I said, even though it's a lot of information, we'll be putting out like easier tools to contact your legislator. But I think just kind of understanding our messaging behind it and the background info and our key priorities as we move forward is great. So thank you again. And thanks to everybody that put in the time at the end of the year. Darcy and Angela, it was great to walk in the halls with you or sitting this time. We did a lot of sitting.
Yeah, that was fun. That was good. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. This is
Bye.
great information.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care and see you soon.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.